From Florida's Space Coast, this is Your Career.
Welcome to Your Career. I'm Debbie Featherston, your host, and with me on this edition, we have Anne Gannon. And Anne is a former golf pro. This program is going to be of interest to any of you who are athletes and have, you're kind of wondering, gee, when might I have to make that transition, maybe into a non-athletic career? And so we're going to talk about athletes, transitions, and future careers. And thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here.
You have been successful in realizing what many sports fans and athletes dream of, and that is making it big, becoming a golf pro. Tell us about that journey.
Well, in golf, you start at a very young age. I started as a very young child. My parents were golfers, and so I would go to the driving range with my dad. And by the time I got to high school, I realized that I wanted to get a little better. And so I played in high school, but I was what you would call a late bloomer. So I hadn't done great until my junior and senior year. And so when I got to my senior year, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to play at the next level, but I was lucky enough to be recruited by Rutgers University in New Jersey. And I was just so thrilled to have a spot to play because I knew if I was given the chance that I would have the opportunity to get better. Being a golfer was suddenly cool. So I was able to be right up there with the football team and the soccer team, and we lived in the athletic dorms, and I was blown away with the resources that we had at our disposal. So right away I had this renewed motivation because I could take what those other star athletes had and use that and apply it in golf. So I've always been someone with a tremendous work ethic, but my time at Rutgers, I really worked very hard, even in the off season in the winter, trying to hit golf balls in the range inside and a heating lamp just to do right. But I knew here was my chance, and so by my sophomore year at Rutgers, I won the conference as an individual, which had never been done before at the school. And my story gets a little interesting that 3 weeks later I actually failed out of school. I had not realized that you have to do both. You have to study and play golf. So
well, that's interesting. Before you go down that path, let me ask you a question. How would you describe your experience as a golf coach, or a golf pro, excuse me?
Well, as a pro, once I fell short at Rutgers, I knew golf was what I wanted. That all these other people at my school were picking majors and they were picking careers, but for me it was golf. It was all golf at that point. And to me, I always looked at it as a when I turn pro, when I'm able to make it to the next level. Because in golf, unlike some other sports, you declare yourself a pro. That you just say, I'm now playing for money. Whereas before, you're playing as what we call an amateur, where you're not accepting money even if you're playing in a pro event. So in golf, there's a lot of scheduling to that. And so I knew I had to get to the top level of amateur golf before I could declare myself a pro. So my senior year in college, I actually won what we call the Women's Eastern, which is one of the 4 biggest amateur events. And once I won the Women's Eastern, I knew, okay, here it really is a win, that I've proven myself as an amateur and now I can declare myself as a pro. So when I went ahead and declared myself a pro, I sort of had that plan in place. I knew how good my game had to be because in golf, a lot of it is statistics. Sort of what we take in school applies in golf, that you have to have a certain stroke average and you have to have a certain skill set in place before you can succeed at the professional level.
So other than determination, what prepared you for your success?
I think a lot of golf is work ethic. I mean, that sounds like a cliche answer, but it's very true, because in golf you have to understand what you need to do to get better every day. That we look at it a lot as your quality of your bad shots, that if you're falling short in your mind but you're still hitting a great golf shot, that you will be more successful. So work ethic, just being able to really focus 100% of the time on your next goal, that really was what made the difference. And you see that at every level of golf. It's the people who are, the last person to leave the driving range and the first one to get there the next morning. Those are the people that do the best in the coming months.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I appreciate you sharing that, because it's very interesting. I mean, I've always thought an athlete like a Larry Bird. You hear these stories when he was a young man, high schooler, that he's out shooting so many hoops every morning before he ever went to school.
It's so true.
So it's that determination and practice and persistence, to be, the best that you can be, and not compromising, not giving up. Right?
Exactly. I think so many times athletes, you look at it as physical ability. You say, oh, well, this person's taller than me, this person's faster than me, this person hits a better golf shot in my sport. But really, that's what you see right now. But you don't know what your next level can be unless you put in more time. So many times, we focus on the person we're playing against that day, or the person we've seen on the court if it's, basketball or a team event. But really, you have no idea how much better you could get in an off season or with a couple of months of dedicated practice.
And it's good, because I love the fact that you were programming yourself, very positive reinforcement, when I get there. So that really attributed to your success.
Completely. I mean, I was very lucky to have a golf coach who, from literally the first moment that we worked together, he always said when. And at first I didn't really catch on that until I thought about it. I thought, no one before other than my parents had ever said when to me. So the fact that you had this other set of believing eyes made such a difference in really planning the when and then eventually seeing the when come true.
And you've mentioned your parents, and you've mentioned a golf coach. Were they your primary support? Because I'm sure you needed a lot of support.
Yes, I mean, when, obviously in golf you have a high school golf coach or a college golf coach, but you also have a swing coach that every golfer has, and that's really your sounding board in our sport, because even if you have a coach of a team, each individual's journey in golf is different, that it's purely an individual sport. So having a swing coach, having someone who's able to talk through the mental side, because so much of it is a mental battle that, okay, you fell short today, but really it wasn't your swing, it was what you were thinking when you were over the shot. So having that
Those
person,
little distractions.
yes, or the times where you doubted yourself and then it came true. So my golf coach was amazing and is amazing. We're still close. That he never really looked at it as today's bad round or today's bad shot, that it was always part of our overall plan. So even when you did fall short, it was a minor thing, because we were still working towards the time when you wouldn't fall short and it would happen.
It's just part of the equation, right?
Yes.
That practice, practice, practice.
Exactly.
That's cool. Well, let's go back to this the part of the story around your college education. And I'm curious, even though you faltered, tell me, and any way that you choose to answer the question is wonderful, but I'm curious, how did your college education contribute to your success? Did it support you and help you in some way?
Well, definitely. I mean, I felt like my lesson at Rutgers was twofold. It was first that I just was not prepared to be a college athlete, because so many times in high school, I had been a great student in high school, but I had been talked to as a student only, and then you had this golf side where you're talked to as a golfer only, and I had never blended the two. So when I went to college, all of a sudden my focus became 100% golf, which was great, and I had all these resources on the golf side, but I didn't have anyone telling me you have to pay attention in school. So when I came home from Rutgers, I remember my parents, obviously angry when it happened, to put it mildly. They were so worried that I wouldn't go back to college, and in my mind, finishing college was never an if. That was a when too. It just didn't work at Rutgers in that setting. But I always knew that I would get my college degree, and so I felt like you needed that before you could complete the amateur career and go to turn pro. And now, even in women's golf, a lot of players turn pro before they finish college, but I always saw that golf is a game of a lifetime. It's not like you have a ceiling where you can't play past 25. So to me, I felt like you needed that closure of a college degree before you could turn pro.
So if you could turn back the clock and do something different, pay more attention to something, what would that be?
I mean, it's funny looking back, especially with the Rutgers part of it, but I don't really think that the answer would have been to change my path, because I feel like it's made me the person I became, and even the future success that I had in golf. I mean, at one point my amateur ranking was 11th in the nation, and that took incredible work, and I felt like falling short at Rutgers really taught me that you need to take full control and full responsibility of all the decisions that you make, that it's no one else's fault but your own, and that's sort of the ownership that you have to succeed in golf as well as succeed in life.
So I'm curious, you have had a fabulous and very interesting journey, and you're still quite young and early in your career. What triggered your departure from competitive sports?
Well, in golf, when you turn pro, you have a whole nother element of competitive golf. But the competitive golf at an amateur level does continue. So when I was playing my last 2 years of college, I was playing as a lot of women who were what we call career amateurs, that, you know, in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, that played golf, but they also had other things going on in their life. When I turned pro, I sort of sensed that professional golf just wasn't for me. I'm not a risk it all for the birdie. I'm sort of the, you know, risk averse. And so I knew that as a pro that just didn't work, because now all of a sudden you're playing for money. So if you don't take the shot, even if the odds aren't 100% that you're gonna make it, you're never gonna make much money out there. So after a couple of years, I knew that this just wasn't working with my mentality, and there really wasn't going to be anything to change that. But I also knew that I had seen these amazing women, these, you know, especially playing in Florida, these career amateurs who'd had these rich careers in golf, but they didn't have to give it up. They just weren't out at the pro level. So the minute I kind of made that decision in my head, I mean, the first thing I did was try to get my amateur status back, get it reinstated with the USGA, because I knew golf will always be part of my life. It just wasn't something that I wanted as my job anymore.
Interesting. So, you know, you know, your story is very similar to many athletes, and that's why this topic really interests me when we're looking at careers, because, and I think one of the issues that I've seen and heard a lot about, some in my own career coaching, is the fact that you have a lot of athletes whose athletic careers are cut short. Sometimes it's due to illness, and sometimes there's a family issue that comes up, sometimes there's just a whole host of issues that could come into play, right? Some that were predicted and some that are unpredictable. Just, you know, they just happen, right? And that's kind of common.
Yeah.
So what advice might you have that might help an individual prepare for this inevitable transition from competitive sports?
Well, I think that it's, you know, at its very core, it's a tough thing for athletes and even our culture to deal with, because on one hand, you're teaching these athletes to be singularly focused, to fully believe that they're the best out there. I mean, in golf, we say, you know, if you're over the putt and you don't believe it's going to go in, you shouldn't make the putt. So then it's hard to say, well, we know that you're going to make the putt, but let's talk about the time when you don't. So it's a very hard thing culturally, but I really believe that it has to start when these athletes get to the college level. That, you know, one thing that we don't provide them enough is the resources to think about their plan B. And I think that that's really something that could be improved, because there are athletes that do it. There are athletes that are very successful in the classroom. But so many times they're lost as to what else they would be good at. Even in golf, I saw this all the time, that the people who I played with growing up and the people I played with at the pro level, when they decided to leave the game, they stayed in the golf industry, that they were almost afraid, or sometimes by choice, but so many times they didn't know what else they were good at. And you know, I was very lucky in my college, my last few years of college, that I had an accounting instructor who told me accounting is all work ethic. If you want to succeed in accounting, you just have to study. And that sounds simple enough, but I had never been told that by any other college instructor. And I believed her, and all of a sudden this path in accounting opened up to me as my plan B. But how many athletes do we never tell to study in the classroom? That yes, you only need a C, but you have the ability, you have the work ethic to get the A, and the A will help you. And I think also teaching these athletes that one thing that I was never aware of and never believed is that your transcript comes with you. I mean, I sort of laugh when people ask, my employers ask to see my transcript, but it's all there. I mean, all of those classes at Rutgers, they're still there. And, you know, that's something that you don't realize, that you think, oh, yeah, you know, I'm only 18, I'm only 19, but I mean, I still have to explain my story anytime I go to get a job. And not that they won't hire me or that, you know, they see I now have a master's degree, but on those 3 pages is that first year at Rutgers. And so that's something too, I think could be better explained to the college freshman, that what you're doing will be with you the rest of your life.
And I really appreciate where you're coming from. I have a 12-year-old that I know, and for 2 or 3 years now, he has told me he plans to be a football player. He's going to be a professional football player, make the big bucks, you know. So eyes are in the sky, you know? And so I'm trying my best to influence him, to help him recognize what other gifts and talents he has. What's that plan B?
Right.
You know, how many people really make it big in some of these sports? There's only so many positions, and look how many people are striving,
right,
you know, for those positions. So I really appreciate your perspective and sharing the insights that you have there. Kind of curious, when you were transitioning, reflecting back on that transition, what would you say was your greatest challenge? What was the greatest challenge you faced during that transition?
Well, I think it is hard to change your identity of yourself. That for so long, I mean, even socially, you walk in the room and you say, I'm a golfer. And then people start asking you questions about that, or you have a conversation built on that. And then all of a sudden, you walk in the room one day and you're not a golfer anymore. And so I think that that is something that you have to start thinking about, and realizing that you are more than this sport, even though the sport is what you love, that you are separate from that. I think it's also important to see a way to keep it in your life. You know, so many of these athletes love their sport, and they should. So, you know, I think it's important to see a way that you could blend it into your future, even if it's not at the best. But I also think it's important to look at the skill set that got you there, because so many of these athletes, and this is what I'm constantly blown away with now being involved again at a college, is, you know, these athletes have a wide variety of skills that they can apply to anything that they want to apply.
Right.
So if you can somehow teach them that, hey, that work ethic, that getting up at 5 a.m., you have that, you just might be using it in a different way. You've had success, but you just need to apply it in this other area. Whereas some students, you know, they've never had a full success in anything like that. Whereas an athlete, where if you've gotten a college scholarship, you've had success somewhere.
Sure.
So it's just teaching them to build on that in another area.
What would you say, given the journey that, you know, you've experienced here, where you've really struggled with that loss of identity? Because I would say that that probably is a very natural, and probably for many, they probably share that as being, yeah, that was really a struggle for me. You know, if they've been an athlete and now they're in a non-athletic career. Or they're retired. We know they're retired, but they may still be working or doing something different. So what would be some pointers that you might give someone that may be struggling with it?
Well, I think you first, you know, if you can find a way or utilize resources to find other areas where you could be successful. I mean, I'm amazed at the college at what the wide variety of resources that they have. Career centers that you can take personality tests, or you can take, you know, different interest level tests to find out where you potentially could go. Because one thing in athletics, and I can speak to this truly, is you've devoted so much time. You know, you've given up going to your friends' birthday parties and you know, missed holidays and missed family events for this sport. So you could have been successful in other areas, but you picked the sport over that, which was a good decision. But that doesn't mean that there weren't other areas you could have excelled at before. So now's kind of a time where you can go back to the drawing board and figure out what classes did you like, or what areas do you like, what other hobbies do you like. I mean, one thing I did, you know, when I stopped playing golf was I took tennis lessons because I thought, well, maybe I could be good at tennis or find some other sport outlet, you know. And I think that that's something you can find. Maybe there's other, you know, sports you were interested in but just didn't have the time to do it before.
Yeah, and we sure have seen that, haven't we? From other athletes where they've gone baseball, basketball, football. It's like, wow. And some of them, I know one fellow that was, can't remember his name off the top of my head right now, but he went into 4 sports and did equally well in every one of them. Amazing. And I wonder how much of that was really his athletic ability or his determination and drive and discipline,
Right.
you know, to just achieve, you know. But there had to be some love of sports,
Yes.
you know, that really carried him through and drove, you know, that action that we saw.
Yes.
Well, I'm curious if you could take a moment and just walk us through some questions or maybe the steps that you took to really help you come to the conclusion of, here's my plan B.
Well, I would say that, you know, I sort of fell on my plan B through an instructor who kind of pointed me in the right direction. But one thing that I'm trying to do now is, you know, I somehow wound up teaching at the Eastern Florida State College. I teach accounting, which I sort of also fell into when my husband and I moved down here, and I have 2 young kids, and it was a
wonderful.
quality of life job. Versus before where I was a CPA working in a big accounting firm. But from the first moment that I was in the classroom, I looked out at these 18-year-olds, some of them being athletes, and thought, I think so much of what they need is already here. It's just showing them that it's here. So one thing that I've really been trying to do with my athletes in my classroom is find a way to show them role models that exist on the academic side. So one thing that we've done this past year is we've actually formed what we call the Student Athlete Success Committee, and what we're trying to do is give each team at the college a faculty rep.
That's good. So, you know, when it comes to, I think the whole point here is we have to help people, right, the athletes, recognize there's a variety of gifts and talents, some of which they need and they're using to achieve the current success that they've got in the athletic field, right, in competitive sports. But it's helping them to recognize what those are and which are most transferable, and then becoming aware of which careers really need those so they can begin to see them as building blocks. And then if there's additional education or mentoring or on-the-job experience, whatever it is, that can help them to get where they need to go. Like in your case, you got that degree in accounting that really has carried you and brought you here to Eastern Florida State College.
Yes.
You know. Now, your role at Eastern Florida State College is not just an accounting professor, but you're also a golf coach. Is that right?
Yes, well, sort of through the formation of our Student Athlete Success Committee, I found out that they were planning to launch a women's golf team in 2016. So thankfully I put, you know, in for the job and I was hired. So I'm very excited to now be also the golf coach as well as an instructor. I think it's a good blend for what we're trying to do with our athletes, because now there's a coach, one of our 11 teams is a faculty member, which helps the communication there, and we also have, you know, building a new team, you already know the ropes of the college, so you're not learning there. So I think it'll be a good fit for what I'm already doing at the college, and I'm very excited to get to be back in golf.
Well, it's a wonderful way for you to continue to be involved in the sport that you love and that you've had so much success in, and I think that makes sense. But it is a non-athletic position, but you're still in the game.
Yes.
You know, you're still involved in contributing in some way. And so, you know, I think that's part of what we want. The athletes who we know at some point that career is going to end. They're going to transition. So what's the plan B? You know, what are the alternative careers and options that are really out there for them? Any final pointers or words of wisdom that you might give, words of encouragement to athletes who maybe are facing a transition into a non-athletic role?
Well, I really believe that so many times in athletes, they don't see the success that's not on the field. So I think part of it is taking those skills that you've been good at and even selling yourself. Because if you go on a job interview and you tell someone, oh, well, you know, I've only been playing soccer, I have no experience, I've never worked. Well, that person's going to believe what you say, but that's not true. Because as an 18-year-old, your friends get to sleep till 11, and you've been getting up at 5 and been doing 2-a-day practices. So you've had a job. It maybe wasn't paying the bills, but you've had a job. So I think so many times you have to sell people who don't know what you do on what you do. I mean, we see that even in the college because, people say, oh, well, the athletes, they get the free t-shirt. Well, they have to work incredibly hard for
Yes,
the t-shirt.
they do.
They have to get up at 5. I mean, the women's soccer team can't walk the month of August because they have 2-a-day practices. So, they really work hard. So even, at the college level, it's explaining what they do and what's required of them, because any employer would be thrilled to have someone with that drive and work ethic on their staff.
And I think it would be really interesting to have athletes really complete a survey, 2 surveys. What are the characteristics that you have, right? So what are those personal characteristics that really have contributed to your success as an athlete? And what are the skill sets? Do a real skills inventory. There's a site online called the ONET, and anyone can Google that. It's a government USDOL site. And for any athlete that may be transitioning or knowing that they're going to be facing a transition in the near future, that might be a good place to go to begin to start that survey. Thank you so much, Anne. This has been a wonderful journey, wonderful story. Really appreciate it. And it's just clear that we need to help these young people become more career aware, and that they need to begin to think about post competitive sports before they get there and, time's been cut short or whatever.
Yes.
So thank you again, Anne, for being here and for sharing and imparting this wonderful information. You've been watching Your Career. I'm Debbie Featherston, your host, and on behalf of my guest and everyone here on the set of Your Career, thank you for watching, and remember, be career happy.
More information about this program is available online at millermediagroup.org.